for joining us. This is our second installment in our CI 101 series, where today we'll be talking about cyber infrastructure and cyber infrastructure plan stakeholders as you're working and thinking about developing your own CI plans. Just a couple of housekeeping items first. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be made available via our YouTube playlist. Thank you to those of us who joined us virtual or live today for the discussion at the end. We will stop the recording to facilitate that open dialogue. And in the meantime, please mute your line unless you are actively speaking. Today's speakers, besides myself, are Bobby Clark, who is the Director of CCIT Procurement and Vendor Management at Clemson University. I, the Assistant Director for CI Facilitation, will be bouncing off with Bobby as we present the content for today. And as I mentioned, today's session is the second installment in our CI 101 virtual series. In February, we presented on demystifying cyber infrastructure CI plans. And as you have access to these slides that we're making available, you can click to that recording. Today, we're covering cyber infrastructure and CI plan stakeholders, but we've got future topics coming up leading up to some sort of workshop this summer on grant writing. So stay tuned for details on the rest of the series as you have been so far, and register as you'd like to. And I'll hand it to Bobby now.
And today's agenda, we're going to cover defining what cyber infrastructure, or CI as it's commonly referred to, is. We're going to be talking about what stakeholders in CI are, how you would engage with them, why they're important, and maybe some stakeholders you hadn't considered them sometime or the other. And then why cyber infrastructure development is important to stakeholders and the whole MSCC community. We want to talk about some of the known items when you talk about cyber infrastructure. Sort of research is implied, but there is also some hidden features that help people with teaching environments that we want to also emphasize as well as we can. And then we're going to talk about how it enables education and research and workforce development, which you may not have considered and on your institutions. And then how stakeholders and resources that we can give you that will support you in your CI planning. And then we'll have that question and answers and discussion. Next slide. So I think we're going to do a quick poll just to see what your engagement is. We do this in all of our engagements just to see what kind of growth you get when you actually go through the seminar we're doing right now. So the first poll is up. I think it's available to everybody. And if you haven't seen it yet, I'll just read it really quickly. It says, does your institution have aspirations to increase its research activities? And there's a yes, no, and not sure. And then, is your campus investing in or enhancing digital classroom environments by supporting things like coding, data analysis, and computation? And then yes, no, and not sure. So if you would go ahead and answer and give us an idea where you are. And then once you've answered, I think Emily, our capable person, will show some results of the poll maybe later, and we'll compare that with a quick poll at the end. Okay, as we said before, IT for research is often what we talk about when we use the word cyber infrastructure. It's commonly referred to as CI. What that implies is what research. It means that you do those kinds of independent building items that will allow your research to increase its capability to maybe do better proposals, to attract more research faculty, all those things we're talking about here. Mostly with cyber infrastructure is the entire environment that surrounds your broadband. So not just the broadband, but the fact that you have people around it who are supporting you. You have programs that run on the broadband. You have infrastructure that may be used to enable it. Your IT staff is part of your cyber infrastructure. So increasing your cyber infrastructure changes the entire environment you have to make it more capable and able to support research. Of course, there's always the hidden gem of it also improving your learning environments, because if you do improve all those items, other areas could use it as well. And so what's really important in this idea is that you have this discussion of where you are and where you're going, and that you include your stakeholders, that's the people at the table here, so that they become more involved and engaged in what you're doing and on your research efforts. Next slide. And of course, stakeholders are a very important part of this. Who are your stakeholders? That's your campus leaders, your faculty, your students, and your IT staff. But it also includes your alumni, external partners, funding agencies, and your extended community. And that extended community can be something like MSCC. So we really want to emphasize the fact that you have to, when you're doing your planning, you have to engage with the people who are going to be using this network and make sure that you're accommodating their needs and desires and their pain points. Both existing and potential entities are really important here. So we move to the next slide. That's okay. IT for research. That's she's going back now. So making sure that you do existing people in your stakeholders and the potential entities across all of the boards, across all of the items. So do some exploring. Talk about if you can expand your stakeholder list to be more than just your initial students and faculty and staff. Okay, let's move on to the next one now.
Thank you, Bobby. And I just wanted to talk a bit again about what we mean by cyber infrastructure in a bit more detail. Bobby alluded to the fact that we often use a shorthand of IT for research, but a lot of the same technologies that are used in research outside of the classroom are also extremely relevant in the classroom. We're teaching around coding, data analysis, and computing. But generally, your students or faculty, as they're doing work that needs cyber infrastructure, will identify with some portion or even up to all of the research data lifecycle. They may be planning a project, they need to collect data or simulate it, process it and analyze it, preserve it, make it available for others to use or to share and collaborate with, and therefore also make it reusable too, as they sort of publish results or just make things available for the broader community. And these translate into key needs. Some of these are well achieved with laptops and Wi-Fi, particularly depending on the size of the project that's being pursued in an education or research setting. But generally, these amount to things like needing network capacity to access data sets, collaborate, access cloud resources and other technologies represented in the below bullet points. Those include things like data storage and access to data sets, security, depending on the type of data that's being used, access to research software for processing and analyzing data, which also means a need for computing capacity and easy to use interfaces for actually working with data. And then on the back end of research projects, and even those in the classroom, is sometimes making or needing support for data repositories and archives for preserving data and or making it available for others. And of course, teaching environments that use any and all of the above, not just in computer science, but across domains, are also extremely relevant here in driving cyber infrastructure planning and for determining who your stakeholders are. But additionally, there's people in learning to apply and deliver on the above. This includes not just your faculty and students who need to be able to engage with this technology, but perhaps your IT staff who may need to learn about it in order to support it or operate some of it locally. And there's been a lot of acknowledgement, especially in the last several years, that access to these types of resources is really important for engaging a more diverse and representative body of workforce into STEM disciplines. The National Science Board, which informs the National Science Foundation, coined the term missing millions to capture the idea that there are a number of folks, particularly women and underrepresented minorities in STEM, that need to be engaged yet, and that addressing digital divides, gaps in access to cyber infrastructure, to network capabilities, to reach these types of resources are a really important priority. And then some of your MSCC leadership, and I was actually part of this team as well, contributed together on a report called The Missing Millions, with recommendations to, in particular, the National Science Foundation on funding priorities that address this problem. And in that report, among other specific recommendations, is the acknowledgement that HBCUs, TCUs, so historically Black colleges and universities, tribal colleges and universities, and other minority-serving institutions play a very important role in engaging the STEM workforce in order to address the missing millions. This is represented in a number of statistics like those you see on the screen here, where HBCUs and TCUs are really critical, with strong numbers demonstrating their importance for bringing folks from these communities into STEM. And there are a number of other specific recommendations here that we really take to heart at MSCC and in our programming, including this, that the communities that need to be engaged have to be involved in the solutions for their engagement and have to own the solutions and be able to execute them to a certain extent on their own, which is where an organization like MSCC comes in to help provide shared infrastructure and help you do things like build toward your CI plans and implementation. I'll hand it to Bobby.
So out of this kind of this study, not only are we talking about of the ability to enhance your research options, but it also gives you a lot of impacts with data sensitive educational efforts. So your learning environments that are teaching this kind of research principle, even in the undergraduate classroom, can benefit from all of these kinds of benefits. So there's the idea of project-based learning. We're learning with real full-scale data sets, modern tools in science, data science for collaboration, and large-scale computing experience. And plus, it tends to track the kind of enrollment that most of our institutions are seeking, and then recognize strengths that can probably help you, as well as do things with workforce development, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So all these items are really important to your when you're having a research effort like this, that you get all these side benefits. So even if you're not considering research as a primary goal for investing in this kind of activity, you can get a lot out of it by pursuing these things, and certainly strengthening your cyber infrastructure on your institution. Next slide. Just an example of that is a recent effort that was done in the Atlanta area with Clark Atlanta, Morehouse, and Spelman, I believe, that talked about those kinds of items. Clark Atlanta received a $10 million award from the National Science Foundation to establish this kind of alliance. And they're already seeing effects of this kind of effort, helping them not only with their research effort, but also with their learning environment efforts. We also have seen research hubs in Howard and Fisk University in Nashville. They have 5-year programs to build their items. And so this kind of activity is being led and piloted in many areas with great success. And next slide.
Great. So Bobby highlighted really well that your faculty and students are important stakeholders to improve STEM education through cyber infrastructure support. And that there are a number of activities like this one that depend on cyber infrastructure in order for these sorts of campuses to go for funding and such. Now talking about research programs, if you are developing your cyber infrastructure, even just capturing it and helping to coordinate across your campus, this brings a lot of power to the fingertips of your researchers so that they can level up. And especially for those of you who have goals like we asked at the quick poll for enhancing your research activities, cyber infrastructure can bring expanded project scale and scope, in addition to allowing researchers to sort of speed up their work, say if it's lots of computational processing or simulations as one example. It means enhanced collaboration capabilities so that your faculty and students have the tools and technologies to engage with folks at other campuses. New lines of inquiry can be opened in many cases, realized through access to, especially beyond laptop computing and data resources. And this means overall greater research impact as your researchers are tackling problems that are potentially societally relevant, maybe even for your local communities. And there are a number of examples where researchers at campuses have been able to access cyber infrastructure beyond their campus, kind of driving home the point that not all of these solutions have to be tackled locally, but that you can support your faculty and students to access these even when they're offered off campus. And we'll talk a little bit later about the variety of national resources, but this is just one example of Ariadna Morales, who was a postdoctoral fellow at the American Museum of Natural History, which has a research program, but didn't have the computing capabilities necessary to support her work. So she used a national resource, the OSG's Open Science Pool, where campuses across the country and national labs have contributed excess computing capacity provided to researchers in a single sort of easy to use interface. She was able to submit very large amounts of computational work that otherwise would have taken her months to complete. And then you also have stakeholders that are actually represented both in your IT staff and in students who are the future of the IT workforce on and beyond your campus. Being able to engage with and support cyber infrastructure on your campus, whether that be through facilitation or through hands-on technology experience, is an important part of developing today's and tomorrow's IT professionals, and can be an important part of strengthening and building your own IT workforce on your campus by leveraging student effort and recruiting students into your organization. And this was also a really key component of that Missing Millions report, recognizing that access to technology is sometimes less of an issue as compared to access to expertise and awareness, by having folks on your campus who can help researchers and educators tap into these resources. And you don't have to do this alone. Beyond the Minority Serving Cyber Infrastructure Consortium, though we can certainly help you navigate the ecosystem of resources, there's a really strong national ecosystem to support researchers and educators at campuses, as well as IT staff who need to develop cyber infrastructure to level up their research and education missions. These include organizations that help with things like networking, data transfer, speed, and security. You may be familiar with things like Globus that supports data movement in a scheduled way. Trusted CI supports cybersecurity development on campuses. And then Internet 2, in addition to operating the national network backbone, also provides and bargains for a variety of services that Bobby will talk about in a little bit, like EduRoam for shared Wi-Fi access, and InCommon for shared identity federation that allows faculty and students to collaborate more easily with one another and use the variety of other resources that are out there. Your researchers and educators likely rely on a variety of data repositories and other data sources that they depend on, such as the Census Bureau or the Pew Research Center. I've got a few others up here, but there are many more not pictured. They may need to be able to access scalable computing environments and easy to use interfaces. Some of these are available in the commercial cloud, but there are also federally funded, in particular NSF funded resources like the Access Program for access to high performance computing. I mentioned the OSG, there's the National Research Platform. These tend to integrate both computing and data storage beyond what a faculty member or student would be able to access, say, on their laptop or on your campus. And then there are also organizations that, in a domain-specific way, coordinate software, computing environments, data storage all together for specific research and scholarly domains, such as the Neuroscience Gateway, CyberGIS, which provides global information system data and processing tools. And there's an organization funded by the NSF called the Science Gateways Community Institute that supports these types of organizations. Again, many more than I'm showing here. And don't forget about training and communities of practice, training communities of practice. We've already talked about the MSCC, and you're here, so you hopefully know about MSCC, but there's training available through Red Hat for IT professionals and for classroom resources and interfaces. The Campus Research Computing Consortium is a large professional community for research IT professionals on campuses. The Carpentries provides training materials for researchers and educators in basic computational skills. So you can pursue workshops that way or run some of them yourself. And then we already mentioned Internet 2, which is also a really sort of strong community, and through their Net Plus program does a fair amount of collective bargaining, basically, to provide free and or reduced cost services, some of which are with commercial cloud providers, to the national higher ed community. And if you look at our slides for this later, there are links with each of these photos to any of these resources if you're looking to learn more about them. And I'll hand it back to Bobby.
So really important here that you realize that you're not in this by yourself. That community, of course, with MSCC is a developing community that we want you to join and participate in. But in particular, though, there are items on that previous slide that talk about Net Plus that you can take advantage of even if you're not a member of I2. So I encourage you to take that slide beforehand and go through each one of those pictures and look at the resources that are available to you, because you can have some very quick wins to get things done. And certainly when it's applied to your CI plan, there are lots of resources that may be engaging to what you'll need to do with your stakeholders, which we'll talk about in a minute, about what it takes to get to those resources, to have reliable connections to those resources. That's what your CI plan should start. So I'm going to script a little bit, but you see the arc here. We're trying to show you that there are other resources out there for you to get. And the most important thing you can do as an organization is make sure that your networking is well capable to take advantage of all of those resources so that you can use them in your research efforts and also in your teaching environments. Let's go to the next slide.
And amidst that national ecosystem of resources are a variety of resources that are there to support your development of CI plans and your development of cyber infrastructure on your campus. This includes federal entities with campus-relevant cyber infrastructure funding. The National Science Foundation, in particular, has the Campus Cyber Infrastructure, or CC STAR program, that supports all facets of campus CI, from the technologies to service development to workforce development. But there are also resources across a number of other federal agencies. The National Telecommunications and Information Administration, or NTIA, has funding specifically for HBCUs and TCUs and their local communities for networking, classroom devices, including laptops and desktops, and other workforce development. The Department of Homeland Security and Department of Defense, as you can imagine, support work in cybersecurity research and also infrastructure development. And there are a number of other entities with domain-specific research and education programs, like the NIH for biomedical research, that's the National Institutes of Health, the Department of Education, Department of Energy, and the Department of Defense, that can support the development of facilities that need cyber infrastructure or cyber infrastructure specific to domain-specific research and education programs. And then there's also the national ecosystem of other networking providers beyond Internet 2 that we'll talk about again in just a second. But for example, there's a national ecosystem of what are called research and education networks, or RENs, across the United States, some of which are specific to a particular state or a geographic region. And these are, vary in whether they are a separate nonprofit or kind of provided by an anchor institution in the state or some other variation thereof. But they have helped campuses to connect not just to each other, but to the national Internet 2 backbone. And they have a lot of experience with helping folks develop CI plans and proposals. And so they can bring that experience and connections with other institutions to bear to support not just your development of CI, but also your CI plan work and pursuit of potential funding.
So I'll just pick up a little bit here to talk about the Internet 2 organization. Internet 2 was formed as a research enhancement in the 1990s when several in schools of the R1s and R2s came together and realized they needed something that was going to help them provide the kind of research capability they wanted to pursue. So they created this organization and layered many types of services on here. As you can see, there are lots of different kinds of connections here, many of which are close to your institutions, and making your CI plan a priority to get to this kind of network, is, in my opinion, one of the more important things you should do in a CI plan. Of course, this kind of network means that there's a community surrounding it. And so not just because of the network, you also need to look at the services and the community building that happens in Internet 2 and other organizations like it, so you can enhance your own capabilities. Again, this is about doing things together that you can't do by yourselves. Next slide. And again, don't do this alone. So these kinds of things can help you. We have a way of of navigating this ecosystem that you will need to take advantage of. And the first step, of course, is creating that CI plan and using it to define what your needs are. That needs to be across several kinds of your stakeholders, which means you need to have the conversations on your campus to talk to them about what kinds of needs they have. So the stakeholder involvement that is part of the CI plan is very important, and you can't fake that. You have to do that with conversation and engagement. And that means your stakeholders are important. That goes back to those common stakeholders, but also the ones you may not have thought of. So making sure you make those efforts in your plan is incredibly important. All right, so go ahead, Laura.
I was just gonna say that concludes our presentation materials. We've still got quick poll results to review and then open discussion that will prompt with a question. But first, if you have any questions about this material or about how to get more help with CI plans, feel free to contact myself and Bobby. Check out our previous session in the CI 101 series as well, where we pointed to a lot of other CI plans. But this is definitely an ongoing conversation. A reminder again that this is just our second installment in our CI 101 virtual series. So be on the lookout for an announcement of our next session, which will be in April, leading up to that workshop at the end. So I want to go to our quick poll again. We've got a second quick poll here. And while you're filling out that quick poll, I'll just say that the results from the first one were that every respondent to the poll believed that their institution is trying to develop and grow its research activities, and 75% of participants indicated that their institution has been making investments to improve technology within their classroom settings. Our question here now that you're faced with is, if you were to be leading CI plan development for your institution, select who you think your most important CI plan stakeholders would be. Click all that apply. All right. So we'll share the results now. Thank you for contributing to the poll. And among the answers you selected, 100% of folks selected campus leaders as a most important CI plan stakeholder. Next, with 75%, are faculty, students, IT staff, alumni, external partners, funding agencies, and extended community, which were all types of stakeholders that we pointed to